Hello everyone, welcome once again to Marketing Meanders with Sally and Sam, and today we are extremely lucky to have Mike Foster talking to us about entrepreneurship and marketing. And well, you'll find out that Mike's got a wealth of experience in the area of entrepreneurship, but also in many other areas. And we're going to be going into the actual impact of marketing on entrepreneurship and how you effectively can start the ball rolling with marketing when you are starting a business, a small business, a larger launch, whatever it might be. What do you need to keep in mind? So really looking forward to the conversation. But just to give you a little intro, Mike is currently a mentor and trainer at the Entrepreneur's Mentor, working to help entrepreneurs grow their businesses. And he's also a founder and director of the Oxford Business Community Network. And I think it's fair to say as well, really, in terms of Mike's background, it's pretty varied and incredibly rich in terms of the work he's done with business startups, accountancy, banking, and much else besides. So I think you'll hear an awful lot about the experiences that Mike's had today, which I'm sure will be very useful. And in particular, I think we're going to find out really about the areas, the points to keep in mind about when you're starting marketing and entrepreneurship, about how to keep your stakeholders aligned effectively, and how to work with people, which I think Mike's got a lot of experience in as well. So I've been gabbling on. I will allow Mike to actually now introduce himself and welcome him to this episode. So hello, Mike. If you'd like to just give us a little intro as well from about who you are, where you come from, that'd be great.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Sally. Thanks for inviting me to join you today for your podcast. My background for nearly about 30 years now. I've been supporting small businesses in some way to start, develop and grow their business. For the last 8 years, it's as the Entrepreneur's Mentor, doing exactly that. And that's in effect why I positioned myself as a mentor rather than a coach, was to, I guess, add some value and add some experience from that breadth of experience that I've built. I think my CV, I wanted to build in a way that if I sat around a boardroom table, nobody would be able to pull the wool over my eyes, because I'd have some experience in those different areas that you referred to earlier. It ranges back from late 90s, where I was an area manager for Barclays business startup team. Then I went to join a startup breaking away from South Oxford District Council, before then starting my own businesses over a period of time. And as I say, last 8 years with the Entrepreneur's Mentor as a personal brand, but I've actually been delivering that with firms of accountants, whereby I've been working with their clients as an employee, delivering the advisory services. And beginning of last year, I decided to come out on my own again. And so far, it's been a great move.
Brilliant. Great. Thank you very much, Mike. That's a really lovely roundup. And I'm just going to leap straight in now, actually, to my most pressing question, which, as we all know, is always the first question we ask, which is, what is your favorite dish, Mike?
Well, my favorite dish, I guess, would be steak in some way. The better the steak, the better. And actually eating it in a good restaurant. It's that sort of whole satisfaction that comes with the flavour as well. So yeah. That would be my favourite dish. Not too bothered what it's with, but just a good piece of steak.
Oh, wonderful! Yeah, absolutely. I very much look forward to the time when we can all go out to a restaurant again and enjoy a good steak. It's never the same having it at home, is it? Quite, unless you're like a really good chef at home.
It's for me because I live with a chef.
Of course you do. Yes. Sally has this advantage over all of us. She slips in, but marvelous. Well, that's a great selection, I have to say. I think I might be trying to have a steak at the weekend, so I will keep you in mind when I.
It's on my agenda.
Great stuff. Well, I'll let you kick us off there, Sally, into the meat of the subject.
Thanks, Sam. Mike, I'm going to start off with a really big, huge question, so you can take it wherever you want it to be. So, why does marketing matter for a startup business?
Good question. I think for me, it's really about creating that traction for the business in the first place. And this is why I say to startups that you should not really wait until you are 100% happy with everything, because you learn by, in effect, positioning your offering out into the marketplace. So I believe it's sort of critical, and it's, I don't think you'll ever be 100% happy with your marketing or your proposition, etc. And it's something that you, particularly at startup, you sort of tweak. I use a tool called the Business Model Canvas, which talks about taking your value proposition through your channels to your ideal customer segments. And you can only start with that in terms of what your gut feel is and what your market research is. But, when you take that through, the business model canvas talks about a loop that you bring back around, which is then you build relationships and get feedback from your customers that then can tweak your proposition. So I think in terms of why it matters, I think it's in terms of it just underpins the whole business model. I talk about, again, to startups, actually doing all the stuff in the background, actually, you could argue is a bit of a waste of time if you've got no customers. So if you're putting the systems and processes in place and get it all ready, if you've got no customers, so get the marketing out there. But it's important, I say, and again, I always say to my clients, is make sure your market development is in alignment with your product development, so that you don't want to get a product to market and then you haven't got the market, because suddenly, surprise, it's not there. So you've got to do that market research. And I'm sure you guys have seen it in terms of market research. When I was a bank manager, it used to frustrate me. It's the smallest section in any business plan that I received. And when I said to people, well, tell me about your market research. Well, I've asked some friends and I've asked some family. Well, yeah, of course they're going to pat you on the back and wish you well. Go and do some proper market research and then build out that.
Yeah, or you say that fatal, when they say these fatal things like, who are you selling this to? And people go, oh, whoever wants to buy it. No, couldn't be more rubbish answer.
I was talking to someone this morning about mass market versus niche markets for exactly that reason. Yeah.
To be honest, the other thing you've got to do is make sure that your marketing plan, whatever that is, however big or small that is, absolutely aligns to your business plan. So start with your business plan and say, where do we want to get to? What have we promised the bank we're going to do? Why haven't they've signed it off with a loan? And then make that happen in your marketing plan. So really your initial marketing plan shouldn't be that difficult, because you should have just done your business plan. Yeah,
I agree. And I think, you shared an interesting article for us the other day in terms of the one-page marketing plan. And, I make sure that my clients keep it really simple. I don't know where this idea come from, where a business plan has to be this thick, in terms of, so in terms of a big document, sometimes people write detail for detail's sake, and we sometimes have to keep it very simple. And I think clarity for me is the big thing in business, in terms of, are you clear for, as Sam was saying earlier, about stakeholders? Do you have clarity for all your stakeholders? And obviously your customers and prospects are a part of that. Are they clear about what your offering is? Yeah. And the other thing is you've got to think about is whether you can afford it. So it's all very well to say, oh, yes, I want to advertise on television. I do have smaller clients who say that, and I go, oh, no, you don't, because you absolutely can't afford it. Do you have any idea how much that costs? Oh, it can't be that much. Lots of people do it. And getting people to kind of wind down their ideas so they can actually do something which is going to work, as opposed to something which is, all very exciting, is going to be big and fluffy and sparkly balloons, is quite a hard thing to do too. Yeah, and I think this is one of the things I sort of talk about when you talk about the research, is that, again, linking through this business model canvas and choosing the right channels, because I see too many times that businesses sort of start up and do the marketing that they feel that they should do, rather than the marketing they should actually do. So they love Facebook, so they do Facebook advertising, or they love telephone calls, so they do telephone calls, but it's not right for their market. It's not right to pull that customer towards them. Yeah, and you've got to measure it from the very get-go. You can't just measure it later, because if you're going to get it wrong, you've got to stop it and retweak it, and you've got to be able to do that immediately. Because I do get a lot of people that say, oh no, I don't want to measure it until we've got a place in the market. You're going to get the wrong place if you don't start measuring it right at the beginning.
Yes, and it's really interesting, I think, the whole, because I'm fascinated with the point I was going to come to later on about where to start, and the way in which you can actually sort of iterate your marketing when you're starting off, or iterating whatever you're doing to just get going with the plan you have in place, a simple plan, as you said, Mike. But I'm interested as well in hearing about people who perhaps come along, it's a bit of the chicken and the egg, isn't it? Sort of like, well, they come up with a great idea for a product and they think maybe people will like this. Or more effectively, they come up with an understanding that there are people out there who genuinely need something. There's that need to fulfill. Therefore, you've already defined an audience, because you started with the definition of the audience, and then you developed a product or service to meet that need, rather than the other way around. But do you find when people are right at the very, very beginning, and perhaps, they're not marketers themselves, perhaps they're, I don't know, we always have this example of handbags, our Cotswold handbags. I don't know if there is a Cotswold handbag company out there somewhere, but we always use this example of this creating. Yeah, exactly. So, new luxury handbag range, say, and you think, well, yeah, I know that there is a market for these handbags, but I've come up with a great idea, but I'm not a marketer. I'm great at making handbags. I don't know how to market it. I don't necessarily have a great idea of a grasp of a business plan. What's the first kind of literally the very first conversation you say to somebody at that point who's like, has got a bit of an audience definition. They've got a great product, well, a high quality product, perhaps not relevant, but anyway, a good quality product they think that they can go out with. What's the first kind of thing you'd say in a sort of marketing context or understanding their audience? What are the first questions you'd throw back at them if they were to come to you with that?
I think much of the timeline is determined by the market. So have they got to get to market really quickly whilst they've got that market opportunity? And often for those products or services, something jumps out that's the way to take it to market. I refer to one of my preferred reading lists in the background, a book called Traction, and it talks about 19 different ways of building traction towards your business. So I encourage the businesses to explore that. And the opening paragraphs of that book talk about not dismissing that one of those 19 things because of your personal feelings about that thing. So if you don't like Facebook ads, then you might not do that. So you've got to dismiss that. But it's in about like a dartboard, and they talk about the bullseye. So like you start with your 19, you move 3 or 4 into the middle, you test and measure those, and then you bring 1 or 2 into the bullseye, and you just make your investment in those, because you know that by making an investment in those channels or those tactics, that you can actually gain customers from it, and what your return on investment is because you've tested and measured it. So I think from my perspective, it's just saying, okay, explore what the opportunities are, but be really clear about who it is you're trying to pull towards you, so that you go and fish in the right pond. So therefore you use the right tools, whether it's online or offline, and fish in the right pond, as I say, so where your people are hanging out.
Yeah.
How much does it matter if you get it wrong to begin with, if it's just not quite working, but you still believe in your product?
I think any entrepreneur, if you lose faith in your product, you quite often it's time to close the door on it. It's for me, it's where the passion of entrepreneurship comes from. I think it's being honest enough with yourself, and I always talk about reflection points. I close off every single day in terms of what could I have done differently, what could I have done better, what went well. And I think when I'm encouraging my clients about their marketing, is to think, okay, well, if you've done X, Y, Z, what's your trigger point? What's your trigger point to say, actually, this is enough to stop, or this is enough to actually double down and do even more of it? And it's being honest in terms of that reflection. So I don't necessarily always think it's the bad product or the bad service that they brought to the market. It's probably how they've taken it to market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you say about sort of the testing, I suppose, as well, something we always go on about in terms of marketing and testing what you're doing, and understanding, well, I suppose understanding what good looks like, but also understanding, again, the intentions of your audience. I mean, it strikes me, again, if someone's coming into this, perhaps not as a marketer themselves, but they could be sort of guiled by these vanity metrics, for example, to a certain degree, when they, if say, for example, they go out on Facebook in a big way and they spend a few grand, and they go, well, this is amazing. We've had 500,000 click-throughs or impressions on this and that. Perhaps they need that help to then guide them on, okay, well, let's look through in the financial side of things to the bottom line here, what is actually coming through. Or because I mean, is it difficult, do you think, particularly with marketing is concerned? Obviously you're starting out and you're not going to know necessarily what your actual conversion timeline will look like with your customers. If you think, well, yeah, I'm gaining interest, and then the next phase is then nurturing people along, and then the final is closing sales. I mean, is that something you think that naturally you can plan for, but kind of emerges throughout the processes that you follow with your plan?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things around the numbers, and those that do know me know I do love a number. Most things I think come back to a number. Whether we're measuring something, even if that's a customer service, we say, how do you rate us out of 1 out of 10, for example? So I think it's from a number perspective in terms of testing and measuring. I think I see many businesses measure the wrong things. They tend to measure what I class as outcomes rather than activity. So they'll be measuring, let's say, for example, just a set of accounts. They'll be measuring how well my turnover is going, rather than the actual success drivers that drive that turnover. So if we bring that back to marketing, they might be measuring, I don't know, how many new clients have I got from that medium of my marketing plan, rather than actually working it back and saying, actually, if I have a number of conversations at networking events that lead to a number of proposals that lead to, a number of discussions that lead to a number of proposals, then I will get those customers, and therefore focusing on the activity number and measuring those activity numbers rather than the result. Because it's a little bit like, if you say, okay, I want 10 clients this month, and you go, okay, get to the end of the month, I haven't got 10 clients. Well, what do I do next month? Do I try harder? Well, I probably tried as hard as I could. So, having that breakdown, I think, is of the right metrics and the right, what I call success drivers. I think the second aspect then comes back to the whole budgeting thing. And, unless you're a big corporate, the McDonald's of this world that can do the big brand advertising stuff, we've all got limited resources for our marketing in terms of time and money. And I think from then a budget perspective, I often get asked, well, how much should I spend? Or should my marketing plan be a percentage of my turnover, for example? And for me, it's much more considered than that. It's more about how much money and time investment is it required to deliver your plan. So coming back to our plan that we talked about earlier. So when I break my plans down with my clients, it's okay, let's do your strategic piece, in terms of who you're aiming for and what your messaging is, etc. But then in terms of your activity plan, what's the activity plan that you need to deliver that strategy? And then you can actually break that down in terms of execution to say, okay, well, if I need to do social media, who's going to do it? How much is that going to cost, etc. If I need to do a telesales campaign, what's that going to look like? If I need to do X, Y, Z, and then I at startup encourage the business to plan that out and say, okay, that's what I need as a plan. That's what it's going to cost me. That's my marketing cost. Then that goes into the bottom line, and then we can start to work out the expected revenue to cover the return on investment for that.
Exactly. And if you're not getting that revenue, it either means that maybe your marketing channels are wrong, that that you thought Facebook was going to be terrific, but actually it hasn't been, and you need to start tweaking it rapidly. But you do constantly, you're right, need to put it into the bottom line to make sure that you're measuring things seriously. I mean, I've worked on many people who suddenly they learn new phrases. KPIs, that's a really dangerous one. Oh, Sally, we've got to have, can you tell me what my KPIs should be? No, I can't, quite frankly. No. For those, I'm sure everyone out there does know what it means, but it's a key performance indicator. And that it's not necessarily the same as your goals. Everyone confuses the two, and it causes a whole lot of headaches because you're so busy measuring, and you're measuring two different things. You're comparing things that don't compare. Key performance indicators might be, one of your key performance indicators might be we answer the phone on time every time. Within 3 rings, we answer the phone. That could be a key performance indicator. It's got nothing to do with money. And that's why I can't tell you as a consultant what your key performance indicators need to be.
Yeah, that comes back to, like I say, in terms of drilling down into the real numbers in your business I was referring to earlier. I use a tool called a one-page plan, which talks about I think the other thing to throw into the mix, you mentioned there you've got goals, but the other thing is targets.
Yeah.
And I use a one-page plan. It breaks it into 3 sections. So the top part is, in effect, your vision, mission, goal, and objective, i.e. the goal, the big picture, what it is that you'll want, what it is that you're looking to achieve. The second box is then the targets. So this is the how, if you like. That's, what is it I need to do? What is it that need to achieve? What are the objectives that we're aiming for in terms of target numbers? And then under each of those targets is then an activity plan. And then that's the things that start to drive, for me, the key performance indicators. So say, for example, our vision, mission and goal objective was to double the size of the business. One of the targets may be a certain number of customers that we need to achieve. So therefore, what's our marketing activity plan to deliver that number of customers? And then we can start to drive the key performance indicators off the back of that activity, not the wrong way. And now, ideally, with the one-page plan, what you should be able to do with the consideration is then fold the piece of paper in half and just be totally activity and KPI focused.
Yep, absolutely. And it should then feed up into if you've got it right, it's just going to feed up into your top box.
Yeah, that's really great. I mean, it's interesting as well, actually, just to think about that when you start out, because I remember I had a meeting with a friend of mine who's part of Oxlep. And she was saying, again, some similar things with the one-page stick it on the wall plan, and really pretty simple, but broken into the why, what, and the how, like in that way, in that sense. But it was quite interesting as well when talking about the very foundation, right at the very beginning, with an entrepreneur with an idea. There's always that split, isn't there? Being sort of from a human point of view, of the structure and the joy, the passion, and the structure between the two, isn't there? So, do you often find that you have to almost give people a bit of a cold shower sometimes, who are coming and saying terribly enthusiastic about an idea, a plan, and they may very well have written a lot of detail, but actually the detail is extraneous and it's just not actually going to help deliver on a structure. Do you find that happens with people?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because the definition of an entrepreneur is those that have taken a risk, and ultimately that links into all of us as business owners, because that's what we've done in terms of taking a risk. And you get a range. You get those entrepreneurs that have utmost belief, utmost, nothing's going to get in their way. Their marketing plan will be quite loose. They'll probably spend a few £1,000s to get to the idea, but they can afford to spend that few £1,000s, maybe because of other business ideas, etc. Then you've got the other end of the spectrum, whereby you've got the entrepreneur that is probably less of a risk taker, more steady, more compliant type of individual, doesn't like change, and they have to be the planner, and they're the ones that want to be 100% right before they actually launch it out, if you like. Somewhere in the middle for me is that entrepreneur that's got that sort of spirit of that growth mindset that we talk about, that I'm totally in control of my destiny, I need to go out and do this, but then with a plan, and then with that structured plan, but not overcomplicating the plan, because our mind can only deal with a certain number of things. So when I talk about my 1-page plan earlier, I only talk about 5 targets, because I think if you focus more than 5 targets, your mind's focusing on too many things. So as an entrepreneur, okay, you've got all these things you could do. What are the key things that you need to do? And as we said earlier, marketing has to be on one of those key things to do, because if you've got no customers, it's pointless having the rest of it. Yes, you want to have the other stuff ready and waiting, so when you've got a customer, you can deliver the promise, you can deliver the value that you've taken to market. But it's got to be a key area. So break that down to simplicity.
Yeah, and I think you've got to be relatively risk comfortable, because I think sometimes to learn, in a minute I know Sam's going to talk about a wonderful quote he's got for you've got to fail to succeed, and you really do have to sometimes try something out of the blue and just say, okay, I'm going to give this a go. You can budget around it to make sure it doesn't impact your entire business, but sometimes you do have to take a real risk and say, don't know whether this is going to work, let's try.
Yeah, totally. And I think when we talked about testing and measuring earlier, or that model from the book Traction that I talked about, when you're bringing in, and you've gone from 19 to 5 straight away, so you've already dismissed 14. So to a degree, you've already taken a risk on what you think is going to work before you start testing and measuring 4 or 5. So one of the best things I think in any business owner, any entrepreneur, is that gut feel. And if when you manage that gut feel, and most people have got a good sense of that. And yes, we were talking offline about whether you're ever 100% right. No, you're not. So you're going to make mistakes, and it's learning from those. And I say to my clients, is everything we do is an outcome, whether it's an outcome we want to repeat, whether it's an outcome we want to learn from, or whether it's an outcome that we don't ever want to repeat and we never do again. And we can relate that to our marketing.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it keeps your business soul going, to think, it's been a disaster, but I've learned something. That's, makes every day a good thing.
Yeah, and that's absolutely connected to, as you mentioned, Sally, I was going to sort of quote on an entrepreneur I met when I used to work at the business school in Oxford, and we were working on a program. Ultimately, actually, this program didn't take off in the end, funnily enough, but it was a very useful lesson. It just always stuck with me. We were sitting around a table, and we'd been asked to sort of come along with a plan of what we were going to do, marketing plan, with as much detail as we could have. And then there were people putting the elements together and the product and all the rest of it. And then this guy was, I think, almost like a kind of like an internal consultant. He was sort of affiliated with us, and he was involved. And he just, a lot of people have been talking for probably about, I don't know, half an hour, 40 minutes about lots of detail. This is right near the beginning. And I was sort of thinking, okay, let's see how it goes. But he just said to everybody, well, the thing is, he's a serial entrepreneur. He set up lots of businesses, and he said, I've done that, I've exited. And the thing is, you need to think about is, if you're going to fail quickly, and you've got to start getting things going. You've got to start trying things. So don't be, as you said before, Martin, don't get constrained by the detail and try and get 100% correct and then move. Try and get as much as you can. Have a simple approach, an understandable approach, a good plan, a plan you can test against and find out, did it work or not just a chaotic kind of, let's just chuck mud at the wall and hope it sticks. But if, when you do start, you can start with things, you said it depends on the nature of the product, the nature of the market. Do you have to move quickly? Do you have to move slowly? But he said, we need to start failing though. We need to start finding points of failure, understand the outcomes, and then improve. So exactly the same piece there, I think. But it just really stuck with me, because I think everyone we're all quite an internal mindset, not as much of an entrepreneurial mindset, I think. And he really injected that point in there, which I thought was so useful. I've never forgotten that meeting. I probably misquoted him in a way, but that's what I remembered anyway.
It's a fine reflection point, because I think many business owners procrastinate because of the fear of failure. But if you reflect, actually most businesses fail, because if we all knew how it could be done or how it should be done, we'd all be firing, multi-million-pound businesses, and it'd be all fine, wouldn't it? So I don't think there is a business that hasn't had a failure at some point. And I think, as Sally was alluding to, there's a lot to learn from the failures. I certainly, in the tougher times that I had with my own businesses, they were better learning experiences than when you're just riding on the crest of a wave, having a great time. And, you learn a lot more, particularly coming back to your marketing, when you've got to reshape your marketing and think about, okay, has my proposition changed? Has my market changed? And it's a discussion I'm having with clients right now. The pre-COVID client or customer is very different to the post-COVID client from that side of it. So do you have to adapt? Do you have to change? But I think back to my own 6 businesses, if I was to have the same marketing plan for each of those 6 businesses, I wouldn't have been as successful with some of them because it wasn't the right fit for, one was a children's indoor soft play centre, the other one was a marketing organisation, the other one was a bookkeeping business. That needed a different strategy, different tactics, different tools.
That's interesting. You have to, and I think for a lot of my clients, you have to persuade them there isn't a template. I can't just give you a template and say, oh, look, here's a marketing strategy. They have to build it. And they also, not only do you have to build it, but you've got to be prepared to rebuild it constantly. Absolutely, the whole time. You can't just say, well, I've done it for the year now. I'll put it over here on the shelf and never look at it again. You've got to look at it every single day, week at least, to make sure that is what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. Fluidity. I think whether it's a business plan in general or it's a marketing plan, it's got to stay fluid. It's got to stay a live document. It's got to stay under review. And if you think you've done it, if you think it's job done and I can just do that filing, you'll get left behind. I don't believe any business is ever standing still. It's either going forward or it's going backwards. So again, how do you keep that momentum?
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of putting elements together then, so if we say we've actually got a plan, we've got a reasonably clear plan and we're following things in a structured way, particularly with marketing then now. I mean, we I think we've done a podcast on this, but we also talk about it a lot, is the DIY approach. And of course, I suppose, given the very nature of someone in a small business as an entrepreneur, starting up their handbag company again, whatever it might be, there's that DIY mentality, I guess, as well, with sort of a spectrum of people who say, well, I'm going to try and do everything myself, or I'm going to actually sort of think, actually, no, straight away, I need to invest in experts to help me deliver because they can do it faster, they can do it more effectively, and they'll give me a better chance. So I need to cost in, again, going back to the budget, I have to cost in that cost. But I don't know, do you find that people are, I mean, particularly with marketing, I suppose, because it's one of those things which, I don't know, maybe sort of people think, well, it's a bit of a specialism, but I can make a campaign. I can do that. It's kind of like, which you can, and you may very well be very good at it, but you may also make a bit of a hash of it as well at the same time. But what do you find with that, with people, the DIY mindset then when they start out?
Well, I think it's one of the biggest hidden costs that businesses don't see is the time and energy and financial pounds that they spend on their marketing because they think they can do it. And they, again, coming back to this 100%, can you do it? It might not be 100%, but it might not be the percentage that an expert can necessarily do that for in terms of doing that for you. I think, my response would be you could do it all your own, but you shouldn't. You may be able to do some marketing, and you might be the right person to do that. In terms of, for example, if you're the business owner, some of the founders I used to work with spinning out of the university, that they were technically brilliant on their product. So really they were the best sales and marketing person to go out there and do it, because actually it would take years for somebody actually to understand the research that they've been through. But actually quite often you can pass certain activities off, and you have to think, I think, one of the things I encourage business owners to ask themselves is, should I do that? Am I the best person to do that? Or do I really want to do that? And often then business owners will think twice about, this hidden cost, as I say, is that I may as well do it myself, or it's quicker to do it myself rather than employ somebody else to do it, and think about, okay, what is the investment I need to make to get the results that I need? And, I think it's when I used to run my marketing business, people used to say, how much do you spend? How much do you charge per hour? And you used to give them a quote and they'd say, oh, wow, that takes me about 30 hours to do that. So that's going to be an expensive investment. Actually, by handing it over to my team, we'd have probably done that in 10 hours, So it wasn't that relative that I think business owners do. So often business owners will take twice as long, I think, doing such activity compared to someone who's got the skills to do the implementation. When I say the skills to implement, it's not necessarily because they've done social media before or website design before. It's because because they're repetitive on that, and they do that, that's one nature, but also because of all their experience and all their case studies that they've got of working with their own clients, they know what works for that business, so they can actually take that to market effectively for them. And I don't think business owners necessarily, when you get into the detail of some of the things you can do in your marketing, whether it's paid for advertising, etc., really understand it. So like you were talking about earlier, Sam, some of the metrics that we could be measuring, I think most business owners look at that metrics and go, yeah, it'd be quite nice to have a number of hits or a number of visitors, etc., but do they really equate to business?
No. And there's always, people do have a tendency to think that they're going to do it well, and actually there's an invisible cost. If you just don't do it very well, you're going to get fewer hits than someone you're going to have paid them, but they're going to have done it 10 times better than you. They'll have got the better message out there. It'll last, it'll be more impactful quicker. And so it's worth paying for every single time. And then actually it means the business owner can spend their time doing what they're good at, and that's running their business.
Yeah. Easy distraction. I think, because marketing is, I think, it's quite an exciting role, isn't it, for business owners. It's, if you were to choose one of the things, you probably wouldn't choose finance. You probably wouldn't choose actually the operational delivery, because actually you're stuck doing that. But actually getting out there, marketing your products, what they get, they get sort of drawn into that area, and therefore, as you say, Sally, they get distracted, don't they, from doing the things they really need to do in terms of managing the business.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Some of marketing is actually really tedious, but some of marketing is putting processes in place and making sure that you've got a CRM system that works and has got all the right data in it, and you are actually examining it. So some of marketing is not sexy and fluffy balloons. It is actually really quite tedious segmentation and analytics of what your audience is saying, and it can be quite tedious. It's not all exciting, and then what happens is that though that non-exciting bit just doesn't get done, so it turns into a huge task.
Devil in the detail, as I refer to. I think again, the other thing with an entrepreneurial mindset is that I quite like that over there, and I quite like that over there, and I quite like that over there, and whether it's the next shiny thing or it's the next thing that your mate down the pub told you about, or you went to a seminar and someone said, you should do Facebook advertising. Oh, should I? Okay, well, I'll get on Facebook advertising. And actually you forget about all that thing you were doing over there just a minute ago that was actually bringing you customers, because you've been distracted over here. And why am I not getting any customers? Because you're not doing what you should have been doing, which was getting you business in the first place.